Every day we navigate a maze of social interactions, and among these, some of the most challenging moments arise from the sharp sting of belittling comments. But what if I told you that the ancient Stoics left us a blueprint for maintaining our dignity and composure in the face of such adversity? Today, we're diving deep into the wisdom of Stoicism to tackle a problem as old as conversation itself: how to respond when someone belittles you. This isn't just about countering negativity. It's about transforming these moments into opportunities for personal growth and asserting your strength in a way that is both profound and impactful. So, if you've ever felt undercut by a remark and wished you handled it with more grace or authority, stick around. We're about to uncover some timeless strategies that will not only help you keep your cool, but also enhance how you're perceived by others, and, most importantly, how you perceive yourself. Before we dive into these transformative strategies, if you appreciate what we're doing here and want to keep learning how to turn life's challenges into stepping stones, a simple free favor I ask is to hit that subscribe button. And trust me, you won't want to miss a second of this video, as every part builds on the last to fully equip you with the tools to thrive in adversity. Understanding the impact of belittling comments. Belittling comments can feel like a small jab to our self-esteem, but their impact often extends deeper than the immediate sting. When someone makes a remark intended to diminish us, it's not just a test of our emotional resilience, it's an opportunity to practice our Stoic principles. Remember the Stoic idea that external events don't harm us, but our perceptions of them can. So when faced with belittling comments, it's crucial to manage our perceptions to maintain inner peace. Let's consider an everyday scenario. Imagine you're at a team meeting and you suggest a new idea. Instead of constructive feedback, a colleague dismissively says, "That might be the worst idea I've heard." In this moment, you might feel embarrassed or angered. However, from a Stoic perspective, this is a perfect moment to practice detachment and objectivity. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears." Thus the remark, as harsh as it may sound, only holds as much power as you allow it to. Instead of internalizing the comment as a reflection of your worth, view it as a reflection of the speaker's perspective or current state of mind. This idea aligns closely with psychological principles too. Carl Jung, a pivotal figure in psychology, noted that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This suggests that our reaction to belittlement offers insights into our own vulnerabilities and strengths. If a comment hurts, it might highlight areas where we feel insecure or less confident. Recognizing this can be a stepping stone to personal growth rather than a setback. Furthermore, encountering belittling comments is an exercise in applying rational judgment, a core tenet of Stoicism. Consider another example. You receive a performance review, and your manager criticizes your recent project harshly, perhaps more harshly than you expected. Instead of reacting defensively, take a moment to analyze the feedback. Is there truth to it? Can you improve? Or was the criticism exaggerated? Here, Aristotle's advice comes to mind. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. By evaluating the feedback critically, you can decide whether it is constructive or merely unfounded criticism, choosing to grow from the experience rather than be diminished by it. Handling belittling comments with grace and insight also involves recognizing the intentions behind them. Often such comments stem from the other person's insecurities or desire to assert dominance. Recognizing this can shift your perception from one of victimhood to one of understanding. This doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but rather seeing it for what it is, a manifestation of their issues, not yours. In practicing these responses, we embody the Stoic ideal of equanimity and resilience. Every belittling comment, then, transforms from a potential wound to a powerful teacher. It teaches us about our vulnerabilities, yes, but also about our capacity for compassion, patience, and growth. It strengthens our ability to remain poised under pressure and maintain our integrity in the face of adversity. By approaching belittling comments in this way, we not only protect our self-esteem, but also enhance our character. We learn to respond not with bitterness or resentment, but with understanding and wisdom. This is the true power of Stoicism, the ability to convert challenges into opportunities for personal and ethical development. Every belittling word can then be seen not as a missile aimed at our self-worth, but as a test of our philosophical mettle. Strategy 1. Make them repeat it. When faced with a belittling comment, our instinct might be to retaliate or to internalize the hurt. However, one effective Stoic-inspired strategy to handle such situations is surprisingly simple yet profoundly impactful. Calmly ask the person to repeat their comment. This method might seem counterintuitive at first. Why would you want to hear something hurtful a second time? But the power of this strategy lies in its ability to shift the dynamics of the interaction. Let's explore this with a scenario. Imagine you're in a social setting and someone makes an offhand remark about your recent job change, saying, "Wow, you switched jobs again? Must be tough to stick with anything, huh?" Here, the implication might make you feel judged or unstable. Instead of reacting defensively, asking them to repeat the comment forces them to reconsider their words. Often, this leads to a realization on their part of the weight of their words, which they might not have fully considered when speaking impulsively. Plato once remarked, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." This wisdom underscores our strategy. By asking someone to repeat a belittling comment, you are essentially asking them to reflect on whether they truly had something meaningful to say or were merely speaking to fill the silence or assert dominance. This pause can encourage them to filter their thoughts and possibly rephrase or retract their initial statement. Furthermore, this strategy aligns with the Stoic practice of focusing on what we can control, our reactions, rather than the initial action of others. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In this context, by choosing to respond with a request for repetition, you control the conversation's pace and tone. You're not passively accepting the comment nor escalating the tension. Instead, you're actively managing how the interaction unfolds. This method also capitalizes on a psychological aspect, the discomfort of repetition. When people are asked to repeat something potentially embarrassing or aggressive, they often experience a cognitive dissonance. Their awareness of the social norms about respect and kindness clashes with their actions, leading to discomfort. This discomfort can discourage them from repeating the comment, or at least make them reconsider their words' impact. This moment of hesitation can be all that's needed to deflate the power of their words. Moreover, the act of making them repeat it gives you time to collect your thoughts. Instead of responding from a place of hurt or anger, you gain a few crucial moments to steady your emotions and prepare a more composed and considered response. This not only upholds your dignity, but also demonstrates a measured, thoughtful approach to conflict, a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. This strategy is also about setting boundaries in how you allow others to communicate with you. By not letting belittling comments slide easily, you signal to others that their words have weight and that you expect a certain level of respect. It's a form of silent assertion that doesn't involve confrontation but clearly sets the tone for what is acceptable in your interactions. The effectiveness of asking someone to repeat their belittling comment also lies in its simplicity. It doesn't require eloquent speeches or sharp comebacks. It's a clear, straightforward action that anyone can employ, making it an accessible tool for those who might struggle with verbal confrontations. It democratizes the ability to stand up for oneself, providing a simple yet powerful tool to maintain one's composure and self-respect. The strategy of making someone repeat a belittling comment is an embodiment of Stoic principles, focusing on control over one's response and turning a potentially negative interaction into an opportunity for personal strength and setting respectful communication standards. This approach not only diffuses the immediate situation, but also contributes to a longer-term understanding of how thoughtful communication can prevent many conflicts. It's a reminder that often the simplest responses are the most profound. Strategy 2. Questions of intent. The second strategy for dealing with belittling comments is to inquire about the intent behind the words spoken. This approach, deeply rooted in Stoic principles, not only helps clarify the motivations of the speaker, but also restores your control over the situation. It transforms a potentially reactive moment into an opportunity for reflection and understanding. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus advised, first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. By applying this wisdom, you encourage both yourself and the other person to think more deeply about the conversation's true nature. Consider a scenario where a colleague remarks during a meeting, "Well, it's not like your contributions have changed much anyway." Such a comment might initially seem dismissive or even insulting. However, by asking, "What did you mean by that?" or "Did you intend to suggest my contributions aren't valuable?" you're prompting the speaker to pause and consider the implications and accuracy of their statement. This not only shifts the focus back to them, but also provides a moment for them to potentially correct any miscommunication or reflect on their reason for such a remark. The effectiveness of asking about intent lies in its direct yet non-confrontational nature. It's a method that aligns with the Socratic technique of questioning, which Socrates used to challenge assumptions and encourage deeper thinking. By asking questions about intent, you're essentially applying this Socratic method to everyday interactions, fostering a more thoughtful dialogue and discouraging careless speech. Furthermore, this strategy helps expose the underlying issues that may not be immediately apparent. For instance, if a friend makes a seemingly harsh comment about your recent decisions, asking, "What leads you to say that?" can uncover concerns they haven't voiced directly. Perhaps they're worried about you and expressed it poorly. Here, your question can turn a moment of potential conflict into one of mutual understanding and care. Asking about intent also helps in building and maintaining relationships based on respect and genuine dialogue. It demonstrates to others that while you are open to constructive criticism, you expect that criticism to be expressed respectfully and thoughtfully. This sets a standard for communication that can enhance interpersonal dynamics, both in personal and professional settings. Moreover, this approach aligns with Carl Jung's insights on human interaction. Jung noted, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." By questioning the intent behind a belittling comment, you're not only addressing the other person's behavior, but also reflecting on your responses and emotional triggers. This can be a profound exercise in self-awareness, allowing you to develop greater emotional intelligence and resilience. The beauty of asking about intent is that it can defuse the emotional charge of the situation. It turns a potentially reactive moment into a proactive one. Instead of responding with hurt or anger, you're engaging with curiosity and seeking clarity. This shift in approach can often lead to more productive outcomes, reducing the likelihood of escalation. In practice, this strategy also teaches us about the power of words and the importance of using them wisely. It reminds us that how we phrase our questions can profoundly impact the direction of a conversation. The Stoics emphasize the importance of reasoned discourse and the pursuit of virtue through understanding, and by asking thoughtful questions, you are practicing these philosophical teachings. Ultimately, inquiring about intent is not just about addressing a single comment, but about fostering a deeper dialogue and understanding between individuals. It encourages both parties to consider their words more carefully and to interact in a way that promotes respect and empathy. This not only improves individual interactions, but can also contribute to a more thoughtful and considerate community, whether at work, at home, or in social settings. Asking questions about intent when faced with belittling comments serves multiple purposes. It provides a chance for the speaker to clarify or reconsider their words. It fosters deeper understanding and communication, and it reinforces your own commitment to Stoic principles by controlling your reaction and focusing on rational discourse. This strategy is a powerful tool for maintaining dignity and promoting meaningful interaction in any conversation. Strategy 3. Embrace silence. The third strategy in dealing with belittling comments, embracing silence, is perhaps the most profound and stoically inspired response. It's a practice steeped in the wisdom of restraint and reflection, emphasizing the power of non-response. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "He who does not wish to speak is heard more powerfully." Silence is not a sign of weakness or acceptance, rather it is a deliberate choice that reflects strength and self-control. Imagine you're in a heated discussion where tensions are rising. Someone throws a sharp comment your way, perhaps questioning your judgment or abilities in a manner that feels personal and cutting. In such moments, the urge to retaliate can be strong, yet choosing silence can be a powerful countermeasure. It allows you to step back from the heat of the moment, preserving your peace and preventing the situation from escalating. This pause can give the other person a chance to reflect on their words and perhaps recognize their harshness or inappropriateness. Silence as a strategy aligns well with Plato's emphasis on the soul's harmony. He believed that the soul is healthiest when its parts are in harmony, not in conflict. By choosing not to respond to provocation, you are maintaining your internal harmony and not letting external forces disrupt your inner peace. This alignment of actions and values is central to Stoic philosophy, which values consistency between belief and behavior. Moreover, embracing silence can serve as a mirror to the speaker, reflecting their words back to them. In the silence that follows a harsh comment, those words can hang in the air, allowing the speaker to hear their own harshness and consider its impact. This moment of reflection can be uncomfortable, but it is often necessary for personal growth and awareness. Silence also speaks to the Stoic idea of not being swayed by external judgments or opinions. It's an exercise in focusing on what truly matters, your own values and judgments, not those imposed by others. By remaining silent, you communicate that the comment does not warrant a response, that it is beneath your dignity to engage with such negativity. This non-engagement is a statement of your values, showcasing a Stoic indifference to petty provocations. From a psychological perspective, choosing silence can be seen as an exercise in boundary setting. Carl Jung, who explored the depths of the human psyche, might suggest that in silence, we are not only protecting our conscious mind, but also respecting the unconscious processes that govern our reactions. By not immediately reacting, we give ourselves space to process and respond in a manner aligned with our deeper values, rather than surface emotions. Furthermore, silence can be strategically powerful in professional settings. In negotiations or meetings, for example, maintaining silence when faced with a belittling remark can shift the dynamic of the conversation. It often forces the other party to fill the silence, sometimes leading them to backtrack or offer more constructive comments. This use of silence can be a tool for regaining control of the dialogue and steering it toward a more positive and productive direction. Embracing silence is not about passive submission. It is an active, powerful choice. It's about choosing when to speak and when to let your silence do the talking. This discernment is crucial, as not every comment deserves your words. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. This strategy reaffirms your self-respect and commitment to a higher standard of interaction, one that transcends petty conflicts and focuses on greater personal integrity and peace. Embracing silence as a response to belittling comments is a testament to your strength and adherence to Stoic principles. It is a reminder that in the face of provocation, we have the choice to respond not with impulsivity, but with a thoughtful, dignified silence that speaks volumes about our character and resolve. Engaging with you all in this community is truly the heart of what makes Stoic Journal special. Each comment, each shared experience, enriches our understanding and appreciation of Stoic principles in real life. For instance, when one of you shared how reframing a critical comment at work into a chance to exhibit grace under pressure, it wasn't just a personal victory, it became a collective lesson in resilience. Your stories and reflections offer practical examples of Stoicism in action, showing us all how to live more virtuously and contentedly. As we conclude today's discussion, let's remember that the essence of Stoicism isn't found in abstract theory, but through everyday practice. It's in these daily interactions, how we handle criticism, manage stress, or celebrate successes, that we truly embody the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. I encourage each of you to take these strategies we've explored today and apply them in your lives. Observe the changes not only in how you feel, but also in how others respond to you. Thank you for spending this time with me and for being an integral part of Stoic Journal. Every question you ask, every insight you share, not only helps you grow, but strengthens our entire community. Remember, the path of Stoicism is one of continual learning and personal development. There's always something more to understand, a deeper level of peace to attain. So, continue to explore, reflect, and engage with us here. Your participation is what transforms these philosophical discussions into a living, breathing dialogue that has the power to change lives. Let's keep the conversation going, and together, let's strengthen our resolve to live wisely and well according to Stoic virtues.